What do you think is the most powerful force in the universe? Seriously. It's not gravity, it's not a black hole, it's a concept that quietly shapes everything, from the ice on our planet to the money in our bank accounts. And yet, it's something our brains are just notoriously bad at understanding. Today, we're going to try to fix that. We're diving into the incredible, confounding power of compounding. And to really wrap our heads around this, we're not going to start with spreadsheets or stock charts. Nope, we're going way, way back to one of the biggest mysteries in the history of planet Earth, the Ice Ages. I know what you're thinking. What on earth does a giant sheet of ice have to do with building wealth? Well, as you're about to see, pretty much everything. For centuries, scientists were totally stumped by this. They were hunting for some huge, dramatic explanation, right? It had to be a massive volcanic eruption or a mountain range suddenly shooting up, some kind of cataclysmic event that just flipped a switch and plunged the world into a deep freeze. But it turns out they were looking in all the wrong places. And here's the crazy part. The real culprit wasn't brutally cold winters. It was simply summers that were a little bit cool, just not quite warm enough to melt all of the snow from the winter before. A tiny, almost unnoticeable change. But that tiny change is where the magic and the danger of compounding really begins. Okay, so think about it like this. That tiny leftover patch of snow, that's the seed. The next winter, more snow piles on top. Now you have a bigger white patch, which reflects more sunlight back into space, which actually makes the air right above it a little cooler. And what happens when the air is cooler? You guessed it, even more snow sticks around. It's a feedback loop. This small, seemingly insignificant advantage just keeps building on itself until, bam, a few hundred years later, your little seasonal snow patch has become a continent-spanning ice sheet. And that right there is the core lesson from the glaciers. It's not about one massive, forceful push. It's about having a small, consistent advantage that just keeps working its magic over a long, long time. So how in the world does this natural phenomenon translate to the world of finance? Right. What can a glacier teach us about becoming one of the richest people in history? Well, thousands of books have tried to deconstruct Warren Buffett's genius. They focus on his value investing, his stock picks, but they almost always miss the single most important variable of them all. You see, his financial journey was not a straight line up. For decades, it was a slow, almost flat crawl. And then, much later in his life, it just goes completely vertical. That shape, that hockey stick shape, is the visual fingerprint of compounding at work. The real mind-bending growth doesn't happen at the beginning. It explodes after a long, long period of quiet accumulation. So let's put a number on that vertical explosion. $81.5 billion. It's a staggering amount of money, a number our brains can't really even process. But the truly mind-blowing part isn't the number itself. It's when he made it. Get this, over 96% of his entire net worth was earned after he qualified for Social Security. His fortune isn't just because he's a great investor, it's because he's been a great investor for 3/4 of a century. You see, those first few decades built the base. That was his glacier. And the last couple of decades, that's when it turned into an avalanche. But to really feel the impact of this, let's just run a little thought experiment. Let's play a game of what if. What if he had started investing later and retired earlier? Like most people do. Well, the difference is, it's just staggering. If he'd started at 30 and cashed out at 60, his net worth would be around $11.9 million, which, don't get me wrong, that's a fantastic outcome. But compared to his actual $84.5 billion, it's a rounding error. It's barely even visible on the chart. It is a 99.9% difference. Let that just sink in. His skill is undeniable, okay? He's a phenomenal investor. But his real secret weapon, the multiplier that created almost all of his wealth, was time. He gave the snowball of his investments decades and decades and decades to roll down that hill. So, if this force is so powerful, why is it so hard for us to really get it? Why does that chart of Buffett's wealth seem so surprising to us? Well, the answer lies in how our brains are wired. See, our minds are built to think in straight lines. We think linearly. If I ask you to add 8 to itself 9 times, you can probably work it out in your head, right? It's 72. Your brain can picture that. But what if I ask you to calculate 8 to the power of 9?
Your brain just kind of short circuits. It's not intuitive. We simply can't visualize that kind of explosive growth.
The answer, by the way, is over 134 million. And that, right there, is the counterintuitive power of exponential growth. It feels impossibly large, it feels wrong, because it completely defies the simple, step-by-step logic our brains are built for.
So this is what we're talking about. It's not just growth. It's growth that builds on itself. The interest you earn starts earning its own interest. The little bit of leftover snow helps more snow accumulate. That is the engine that drives those explosive, nonlinear, hockey stick-shaped results. So what's the big takeaway from all this? If you want to harness this incredible power for yourself, what's the ultimate strategy? It's probably the simplest and yet the most difficult piece of advice you'll ever hear. Maybe the best investment book ever written would just have those words right on the cover. Shut up and wait. It's not about finding the next big thing or timing the market perfectly. It's about fighting the urge we all have to constantly do something and instead developing the patience to just let the process work. And here's the core philosophy. Good investing isn't about trying to earn the highest returns possible. It's not about hitting home runs every single time. Chasing those spectacular short-term gains often leads to taking huge risks. The real key to building wealth is earning pretty good, consistent returns that you can emotionally and financially stick with for decades. Because that consistency over a very long time horizon, that is the environment where compounding is truly unleashed. That's when you go from a small snowpack to a continental ice sheet. It's when your results stop looking linear and start looking vertical. Which brings us to a final, crucial question. Getting wealthy is one thing, but if the physics of compounding are so straightforward, why do so many people who build fortunes end up losing them? Why is staying wealthy an entirely different skill set? And what does it take to master it? Well, we'll tackle that in our next explainer.